Olá, pessoal! Sejam todos muito bem-vindos. Boa noite a
Study.
todos. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos. É uma alegria muito grande a gente poder receber todos vocês aqui nesse momento tão especial promovido pela Urânia. Como vocês sabem, a Urânia ela tem um propósito que é aproximar a ciência, a tecnologia e a inovação para os jovens de todo o nosso país. E agora, a Urânia também está no momento de expansão para os Estados Unidos. A gente acredita que trazer experiências reais, como essa que vocês vão ter a oportunidade daqui a alguns minutos de poder escutar de uma forma ao viva e exclusiva um astronauta aposentado, ela nos aproxima ainda mais da ciência e desperta também nos jovens e nos adolescentes a vontade de sonhar ainda mais alto. E esse é o motivo pelo qual a gente está muito feliz e a gente quer agradecer muito a presença de cada um de vocês. Então, hoje nós temos um convidado muito especial, que é John Thomas. Ele é um ex-astronauta norte-americano, né, da NASA. Ele tem formação em física, doutorado em ciência de materiais pela Universidade de Cornell. Ele qualificou-se também como especialista de missão e participou de 4 voos espaciais a bordo do ônibus espacial, acumulando mais de 43 dias no espaço. Então vai ser uma oportunidade muito única e uma oportunidade muito especial para todos vocês na noite de hoje. As missões do Don incluíram estudos com microgravidade, lançamento de satélites e pequenas pesquisas com o laboratório Space Lab. Ele também é especialista em ciência da educação. Então, eu quero trazer, assim, pessoal, uma importância muito grande, né? Um momento muito especial que a Urânia está possibilitando e vocês são convidados exclusivos para esse momento. Como vocês sabem, né? John Thomas é americano, então toda a nossa jornada ela vai ser, a gente quer trazer assim a parte mais natural da conversa com ele e ela vai ser traduzida pelo Teams. Eu sei que vocês já receberam o passo a passo, mas antes de passar a palavra para ele, eu gostaria de convidar vocês para a gente poder estar ativando agora a tradução. Então, eu vou convidar vocês, pessoal, para vocês na barra de cima, tem 3 pontinhos e a palavra mais. Vou pedir para que vocês cliquem aí nos 3 pontinhos. Ali vocês vão selecionar idioma e fala. Podem selecionar 3 pontinhos, idioma e fala. E aí vocês vão selecionar também mostrar legendas ao vivo. Assim que vocês clicarem no mostrar legendas ao vivo, vai abrir uma caixa de legendas na parte inferior da videochamada, aqui bem na direita, certo? Aí vocês vão clicar nessa engrenagem, podem clicar na engrenagem, e vão abrir as configurações da legenda no canto superior direito da caixa de legendas. Ali vocês vão escolher configurações e idiomas. Bem em cima vai ter o idioma falado, que vai ser inglês, que Dom Thomas vai falar inglês. E aí vocês vão colocar a tradução, vão ativar para o português do Brasil. Certo? Espero que tenha dado certo para todos vocês. Se caso alguém não conseguiu ativar no nosso grupo do WhatsApp, tem o passo a passo e eu vou pedir para que vocês ativem para que vocês possam receber o conteúdo na íntegra. Certo? Então, Dom, é um grande prazer, é um orgulho muito grande poder te receber. And now, this stage is yours, Don. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Don Thomas, as you heard, and I'm a former NASA astronaut. And I had the amazing opportunity to fly in space 4 times aboard the space shuttle. I was on Space Shuttle Columbia 3 times and Space Shuttle Discovery once. I've spent 44 days up in space, and during that time, I went around the Earth 692 times. So I've seen a lot of our planet. I can't tell you how many orbits I passed over Brazil. I know what a beautiful country it is from space, and I look forward to visiting in person down on the ground here sometime in the near future. So I'm very excited to be with you this evening, and I welcome all the parents and especially all of our great students that are with us here this evening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share with you my story, how I became an astronaut, and then talk about how we live and work up in space. I'll also show you some of my favorite pictures of the Earth taken from space. We'll talk about the landing, and then we'll open it up for your questions. So if that sounds good, I'll get my presentation loaded here. We can begin. My presentation is called Reaching for the Stars. And those are the 4 mission patches you see here from the 4 space shuttle missions that I was on. There we go. Good.
Oh,
My
now it's
apologies here.
oh good.
Okay, I think everybody here recognizes this famous astronaut, Marco Pontes, who was the first astronaut from Brazil to go into space. And he launched on March 29th, about 19 years ago, aboard a Russian Soyuz rocket, along with Jeff Williams, the American sitting here on the right-hand side. And their mission was to go up to the International Space Station. Here's Marco working in the science laboratory aboard the International Space Station. And I want to point out every single picture I've ever seen of Marco Pontes. He's got that beautiful smile on his face. That must be true of all Brazilians, huh? And here he's working also on a science experiment. It looks like a Brazilian experiment that was sent up for him to the International Space Station. And here's a happy astronaut upon landing back on Earth. I think he had a 4 or 5 month mission up there, and I'm sure he was very happy to be back on Earth. And besides Marco Pontes, there's been a lot of Latin American astronauts that have gone into space from Cuba, Mexico, Brazil, Costa Rica. And Carlos Noriega, he's a good friend of mine. He was born in Peru. He's an American astronaut, but he flew on 2 space shuttle missions. And then we have a number of NASA astronauts that have Latin American heritage that you see here. So I think Latin America is, very well represented in the space community. So I want to share with you my story, how I got here, how I became an astronaut. I was just 6 years old when the first American astronaut launched into space. That was a long time ago, back in May of 1961. And at my elementary or primary school up in Cleveland, Ohio, here in the United States, they brought all the students to our gymnasium, and I sat on the floor and watched the launch on a small black and white TV. And as soon as our astronaut had made it to space that day, I remember sitting there very clearly saying, I want to do that. So ever since I was 6, I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to ride a rocket. I wanted to experience zero gravity floating around in space. And I wanted to see the sunrises and sunsets with my own eyes that the astronauts would describe. So I always knew what I wanted to do. The problem is, how do you get there? How do you become an astronaut? And as a young boy, I didn't know how to do this. We only had 7 American astronauts at that time, and I didn't know any of them. But the one thing I recognized early on was it was going to be very difficult. I knew there was a lot of competition. Thousands of people apply to be an astronaut, and then a small handful get selected. So I knew as a young boy, my only shot of ever making it to space was going to have to involve me working hard and doing my best in school every single day. And that's what I tried to do. In math and science, all my STEM subjects, I tried to do my best, but also reading, math, history, music, gym, whatever subject I was studying, I always gave it my 100% best effort. After high school, I went on to university and got my bachelor's degree in physics, one of the sciences. And that was the minimum degree you needed to become an astronaut, a 4-year university degree in math, science, engineering, or the medical field. But I knew the competition was going to be tough. So I thought I can't start applying to NASA to be an astronaut with just the bare minimum requirements. So I stayed in university and I got my master's degree and my PhD in engineering. So after 10 years of university, I got out I took a job with a company, a big telecommunications company called AT&T Bell Laboratories, doing research work for them. And it was at this point then that I started applying to NASA to become an astronaut. Now, NASA selects new groups of astronauts every 3 or 4 or 5 years. They'll pick a small group of 10 or 15 new astronauts. And 2 years after I finished university, NASA put out the announcement they needed new astronauts. I was all excited. I wrote to them. I got the application form, carefully filled it out. I mailed it back in, and you could probably guess what happened. They turned me down. They said no thanks. I was surprised, but I didn't give up. I decided, well, I'll try again. 2 years later, they had another astronaut selection. I got another application form, filled it out, sent it in, and then that second time, I got turned down again. So at this point, I was thinking to myself, my grandmother and I have the same chance of being an astronaut. And that chance was zero. I wasn't even getting close in the competition. So at this point, I realized I needed to do more to get noticed by NASA. And being an engineer, what I did is I studied the data. I carefully looked at the background of the astronauts that were successful getting into the program to see what do they have that I don't have? What am I missing here? What education or background or experiences? And by carefully studying that, I learned a few things. The first thing was that most of the astronauts they were selecting already had flying experience. It wasn't a requirement, but it seemed to help a little bit. So I started taking flying lessons and I got my pilot's license. I also noticed most of the astronauts that they were selecting had some parachuting or skydiving experience. It was not a requirement, but it seemed to help a little bit. So I learned to do that. I also taught a university course because that seemed to be experience that NASA was looking for. So I worked on these activities for 3 years. Then there was another astronaut selection. This is number 3. I sent my application in, and this time NASA called me up and they invited me down to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And out of the thousands of people that apply, NASA will select 100 individuals. They bring you to Houston, Texas, and you spend a full week on a very thorough medical exam. And then there's a 1-hour interview. I passed all the medical tests. That went very well. And I went on to the interview, and that went extremely well. So at the end of my week with NASA, I thought, boy, that couldn't have gone any better for me. And I went back to my job and just sat there and waited to see, did I make it or not this time? And I was back at my job about a week or so when some of my friends started calling me up from across the country. They called up and said, hey, Don, the FBI and the police have been calling about you. Now, let me tell you, if the police are ever calling about you, it's either really good or really bad, right? In this case, it was really good. NASA was doing a security background check on me, and they looked into my background. They checked the police records wherever I lived to see if I'd ever been in trouble. They met with all my bosses from every company when I was 15 years old on. They would meet with my former bosses and ask them, what kind of worker was Don? Did he show up to work on time? How did he treat the customers? How did he treat the coworkers? And then they went up and down the streets in any neighborhood, wherever I lived, talking to the neighbors, asking, hey, what can you tell us about Don Thomas and how did he treat people in the neighborhood? When I heard this was going on, I said, this is a great sign. I didn't think NASA could be doing this detailed security check on all 100 people they interviewed. I thought they must have selected their astronauts, and this is the final check to make sure you're good to go before they announce the names. So I was pretty excited, and it was 2 months later I got the phone call from NASA. They called up and said, Don, thank you very much for applying. We had a lot of good candidates. We did not select you, but good luck in the future. I hung up that phone and I was in shock. I really thought I had made it into the astronaut program, but here for the third time, NASA said no. So at this point, I made the decision, hey, it's time to stop, to give up on this silly dream of mine. I worked hard. I gave it my best effort. I applied 3 times, but clearly NASA wasn't interested in me. So I decided I'm going to go to bed. I'll get a good night's sleep. And then in the morning, when I wake up, I'll put together a new plan for my career that does not involve being an astronaut. I went to bed that night. The next morning when I woke up, the very first thought that popped into my head was, I still want to be an astronaut. So I asked myself, are there any more of these little things that I can do to improve my chances, to make myself a better candidate? And once again, by carefully studying who they were selecting and who they weren't selecting, I noticed that most of the civilian astronauts that they were picking, they were individuals that were already working down at the NASA Johnson Space Center. So at this point, I quit my job. I drove halfway across the United States to Texas, and I got a job with NASA as an engineer working on the space shuttle program. I did that for 3 years. Then they had another astronaut selection, number 4. I sent my application in. They called me up for the medical testing and the interviews, and that all went very well once again. And then it was about 3 months later, I got another phone call from NASA. And this time they called up and just said, hey, Don, are you still interested in being an astronaut? Because we'd like to offer you the job. I said yes. I hung up that phone. And for the next 10 minutes, I was jumping up and down, yelling and screaming because I knew I made it into the astronaut program. I was 35 years old when I got that call, and I started a 4-year training program for my first flight. So the first time I made it to space, I was 39 years old. So it took time for me to get there. But the number one lessons that I've learned in my life that I want to share with you this evening is to always work hard. You want to do your best in school every single day, not just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but every day on every subject. You want to give it your absolute best effort. And you need to be patient because some of these dreams that we have, it takes time. It took me till I was 39 years old to make it to space. But boy, was it ever worth all the hard work and the time that I put in there. So I tell people, do not give up on your dreams. You may get rejected, you'll get turned down, it may seem impossible. Do not give up. Keep working towards your goal, keep working towards your dream, and you can accomplish your dream in life just like I was able to do. So I went from this little boy just dreaming about going into space to getting assigned on 4 space shuttle missions. This is the crew from my last flight, and the last time I was in space was 28 years ago aboard Space Shuttle Columbia. We had 7 astronauts on the crew, 2 military pilots in the front row with the helmets that help us fly the shuttle. On the left-hand side with the helmet is our commander. His name was Jim Halsell. He was an Air Force test pilot. On the right-hand side with the helmet is our pilot. Her name is Susan Still. And Susan was a pretty unique individual. She's only the second woman to pilot the space shuttle. And Susan was one of my country's top Navy fighter pilots. So it was really a great opportunity for me to fly with her on this mission. And then in the background, we have 5 of our science astronauts. We're called mission specialists and payload specialists. Our job is to do all the science on board the space shuttle. We're trained to work the robotic arm on the shuttle if we have a need for that. We deploy satellites and do spacewalks. So we each have our area of specialty on the crew. You might not recognize that guy on the far right-hand side, but that's the way I used to look 28 years ago, before glasses, gray hair, wrinkles, and a few kilograms around the middle. Here you see the space shuttle on the launch pad, and I took this picture the night before my first mission. I went out to the launch pad about midnight with another astronaut, and it was so amazing to stand there right at the base of the space shuttle, all lit up with these bright lights against that pitch black sky. And as I stood there looking up at it, I had incredible butterflies in my stomach. A little piece of me was nervous, a little piece of me was scared, but my main emotion was just one of great excitement because I knew 12 hours from when I'm taking this picture, I'm going to be strapped into my seat blasting off to space. And I almost couldn't believe where I was and what I was about to do. So they bring us out on launch morning about 3 hours before liftoff. And here I am in my space suit, our launch and entry suit, we call it. And I'm standing again right at the base of Space Shuttle Columbia. And when it's my turn to get strapped in, we'll take an elevator up the side, up to the top of the shuttle that you see here. And when it's my turn to get strapped in, they'll call my name. I'll turn that corner to the left, walk down an access arm, and at the end of it there, you see the round hatch or door for the space shuttle. Before I climb inside, these two gentlemen in the white suits will help me put on a parachute. We'll get the helmet on, gloves on. They'll check all my equipment. Once everything looks good, I get on my hands and knees. I crawl on that white board, go through the round hatch, and we'll have people there to help strap us into our seats. We're laying down on our backs for liftoff. We've got shoulder harnesses and seat belts on. They strap us in good and tight. Like maybe when you were younger, your parents would put you in your car seats. And that's how, we're strapped in nice and tight, because there's a lot of shaking and vibration during liftoff, and you don't want to bounce out of your seat and hurt yourself or damage any equipment. Once we're all inside and strapped in, they close and seal that side hatch there, and then everybody moves away from us 5 kilometers. And it gets very quiet inside the space shuttle up until 6 seconds before liftoff. At that point, 3 big engines at the tail of the shuttle start coming up to full power. And 6 seconds later, we light these big white side rockets. They look like giant white pencils here. They're called solid rocket boosters. And the instant they light, boom, immediately we took off. So laying on my back in my seat, I could hear the roar of the engines. I could feel the shaking and vibration going on. And right at the instant of liftoff, I felt a push in my back. And it felt to me like somebody had their hand in the middle of my back, just pushing me up into the sky. And that's what the shuttle's doing here, literally pushing us, tossing us up in the air. This picture's taken 4 seconds after liftoff. We're going 200 kilometers an hour already. 8.5 minutes later, the engine shut down, perfectly quiet, and we're in space. It only takes 8.5 minutes to get to space. I'll bet for many of our students with us this evening, it takes longer than that to get to school in the morning. And think about it, in 8.5 minutes, you could end up being 300 kilometers above the Earth. And at this point, we're traveling at a speed of 27,000 kilometers an hour. That's 7 kilometers a second. So we go so fast that we orbit the Earth. We go all the way around in only an hour and a half, in 90 minutes. Now in space, we have 0 gravity there, so you don't walk like we're used to doing here on Earth. To move around in space, it's just a little push with your finger, and you'll go sailing through the air like Superman or Superwoman. This is a picture of Chaki Mukai. She was the first Japanese woman in space, and I flew with her on my first mission. And she's just floating into our science module there. And it's just like a very free, comfortable thing to do. It's a lot of fun floating around in space. And in space, there's no up or down. I think we pretty much agree which way is up and which way is down here on Earth. But in space, there is no up or down. And here on Earth, if you stand on your head, all the blood rushes to your head because of gravity. I'm sure you felt the pressure from that, like you're going to get a headache. Well, in space, without gravity, that doesn't happen. You go upside down and you feel totally normal. So this is a picture of Nancy and Kevin on my second flight. And Nancy's looking at Kevin there saying, "Hey, Kevin, you're upside down." Well, Kevin is looking right back at her saying, "No, you're upside down." This is what Kevin sees. He thinks he's upright and she's upside down. So I'd ask you, who's correct here? They're either both right or both wrong. You never feel like you're upside down in space. It's everybody else in the room. So wherever your head is pointed, your brain says that direction is up for you. Our food in space is mainly freeze-dried food. So this is fully cooked food. They freeze it, they dry it out, remove all the moisture, and then they put it in these plastic packages like you see here. And the reason we do this is because this food will stay preserved for a few years without the need for refrigeration, because we don't have a refrigerator and freezer up in space. So you see the different food packs here. And to prepare a meal, we bring it to a food station that you see here. There'll be a sharp needle that'll poke into that package. We can inject some water in there. That dry, hard food will absorb that water, soften up, and after a few minutes, it's ready to eat. We just cut these plastic packages open with a pair of scissors, and then we eat them with a normal fork or spoon. We have all kind of different foods up there, many vegetables like you see here, asparagus and broccoli. We've got these strawberries. When you add the water to them, they turn bright red. And when I would cut the package open, I could just smell fresh strawberries. So they were a great treat in space. We've got macaroni and cheese and spaghetti and meat sauce. So we have all kind of different food up there. And most of it tastes just about as good as it looks. So it's not very tasty. It doesn't taste really delicious. I would never go to a restaurant that was serving space food, but it's good enough for, a couple weeks, a couple months in space. You see the drink bag here. That's how we drink in space. We can't drink out of a glass or bottle because without gravity, the water or milk, whatever, is not going to fall or pour out of a glass or bottle. So we drink out of these silver pouches. They're very similar to some of the juice drinks that our students have in their lunches. We have powdered beverage in there, powdered lemonade, powdered coffee, powdered tea. We could add water to that pouch, shake it up, put a straw in there in the top of it, and then you just squeeze it into your mouth. And that's how we drink in space. Sleeping's a little unusual in space. The inside of the space shuttle is pretty small, about the size of your kitchen at home. And we didn't have dedicated bedrooms. So when it's time to go to bed, we just put the sleeping bag on the wall like you see here. We float inside, zip it up, and go to bed. We wear the dark eye shades that you see in this picture because we go around the Earth every hour and a half. And we get 45 minutes of daylight, 45 minutes of nighttime. So if you don't want the sun coming in your eyes all the time, you need to wear the eye shades that you see here. And to clean up in space, we don't have a bathtub, we don't have a shower, we don't even have a sink like you have in your kitchen or bathroom at home. So to clean up, we have some of those aluminum drink bags that I showed you. And instead of having powdered juice in these, a few of them will have powdered soap. And we could add hot water, mix up a bag of hot soapy water, and we just put it on a washcloth and give ourselves a sponge bath. That's how we clean up in space. For washing our hair, we have a special shampoo that you see here. It's called no rinse shampoo. And this was developed for people in the hospital who can't get out of bed to take a shower. It's very easy to use, doesn't require any water. All you do is squirt some of the shampoo in your hair, you work up a lather, then you take a towel and dry your hair and you're done. I took this picture. I love the bottom line on the bottle. It says, for beautifully clean, full-bodied hair. And I want to share with you what that looks like in space. So here's Susan, our pilot on my last flight, and anybody with long hair, it's going to float all over. I'm not picking on Susan. Even my short hair floats all over in space. And we have a saying. We say that every day in space is a bad hair day, and that's pretty accurate. I want to share with you the granddaddy of all bad hair days in space. And that's right here. This is Marcia Ivins. She flew on 5 space shuttle missions. She had super long hair, as you see. She wouldn't leave it like this normally. Otherwise, for the rest of us, it'd be like scuba diving through seaweed. She'd put it in a ponytail, but just did this for the picture. Now, exercise is really important in space. Here on Earth, we're walking around using our leg muscles, and you're carrying your books and backpacks at school. So you're always using your muscles. In space, it's just a push with the finger and we float through the air. And everything is weightless in space. I can lift your car at home with one finger in space. So we don't use our muscles up there at all. And it's very important exercise. So we had this bicycle that you see here that we would ride every day for about 45 minutes. It would get your heart muscle working, get your leg muscles working, so that when you come back to Earth at the end of your mission, that you're still in good physical shape. This is the toilet on board the space shuttle. It's in a very small closet, very similar to an airline toilet. We had a curtain that goes across the front like a shower curtain for privacy. And near the center of the picture, you see the white toilet seat like our toilets here on Earth. But here on Earth, we use gravity to collect the waste material. You can probably imagine what would happen in space without gravity up there, and I'm not going to describe that here tonight. But this toilet is like a porta potty that you may see at a football game or a construction site. And in the bowl of the toilet, we have giant fans. To activate the toilet, there's a little white knob off to the side. You push that forward, it activates those fans, and it sucks air from the toilet seat downward. So we use that down rush of air to act like gravity to keep the waste material down. And that's the secret of the space toilet. I'll wrap it up by showing you some pictures of the Earth. And whenever an astronaut has a free minute, we float to the window to watch the Earth go by. I have a map in my hand. I'm trying to figure out where we are around planet Earth. And I'm looking out one of the windows towards the back end of the space shuttle. And I took a camera right up to that window. I pressed it against the glass and I took a picture. So you can see exactly what my eyes are looking at. And this is the view I see out the back. So there's the beautiful blue Earth from 300 kilometers above. All the blue that you see here is the Pacific Ocean. The white areas are puffy clouds. That peninsula coming down from the upper right-hand corner, that's Baja California, part of Mexico there. Now, if you look carefully at the bottom edge of the Earth, either to the right or to the left of the space shuttle, you may see a little thin blue line at the very bottom edge of the Earth. What you're looking at there, that is our atmosphere. You know, here on Earth, when we have a nice sunny day, you look up at that sky and it looks like the blue sky goes on forever and ever. From space, we're looking at the atmosphere edge on. And it looks just like you see here. It looks like a paper thin layer. Most of the air protecting us here on planet Earth is in the first 20, 25 kilometers or so. And that's about it, which is why when we pollute the air, it can have such a major impact on our planet. Here's a giant hurricane. I saw many storms when I was up there. This was a big one over the Pacific Ocean, about 600 kilometers across. And we flew right over the center of it. And from 300 kilometers up, I could go to the window, look down, and look right into the eye to the center of the hurricane. And this is the view that I got to see. So there is looking into the eye. You see the blue water, the Pacific Ocean. The eye is maybe 20 kilometers across or so, and has very light winds, just a few kilometers an hour breeze there. But about 10 or 15 kilometers away, that's where you get the highest wind speeds in the eye wall. And this was a powerful Category 3 hurricane, had top wind speeds of close to 200 kilometers an hour. Here's a volcano venting steam. This is in the South Pacific near Indonesia. And here's the Himalaya mountain. And right at the center of the picture, right there, that is Mount Everest, tallest mountain on planet Earth. Now, I can sit here in front of you this evening and tell you without lying, I have seen the top of Mount Everest with my own eyes about 25 times during my mission. I call it the lazy man's way to see the top of Mount Everest. No climbing involved, just cruising overhead at 27,000 kilometers an hour. I use this picture to illustrate some of the things I got to see and do during my career. I've never climbed Mount Everest. I never will in my lifetime, but I've seen the top of it many times. I've seen the Great Barrier Reef off Australia. I've seen the beautiful, beautiful Amazon rainforest in Brazil there in South America. And I've seen Mount Kilimanjaro, big volcanic peak in Africa, poking up through the clouds. So many amazing sights from space. And here you see the state of Florida in the United States here. And I'm going to advance it right there. I'll show you that is the Kennedy Space Center. And we launch on that Cape Canaveral. It's a cape area that's jutting out into the Atlantic Ocean. And that makes the Kennedy Space Center an ideal place to launch rockets from. And we've launched 83 rockets from the Kennedy Space Center in 2025. So it's going to be close. We may be launching 100 rockets this year. That's like 2 a week or so. It's just amazing. And I don't know if anybody recognizes this beautiful part of the world. I'll leave it up there for a second or two. Got some beautiful beaches. Looks like it's on an ocean. Let me put in the name here. It's Rio. I hope some of you have been there. I've never been there yet, but I sure would like to. But that is the way Rio looks from space. And here's zooming in a little bit more on the city. You see the bridge, cutting across there, Sugarloaf Mountain, Copacabana Beach there. When I was in space, I would see those white beaches and I would wish, boy, I wish I could lay down there on that beach right now. Today, when I'm here on Earth, I look up at the space station passing overhead and I say, boy, I wish I was up there. So the grass is always greener somewhere else, isn't it? And how about this beautiful city there? There's a city in the upper left-hand corner. Cities show up very gray from space. And if you don't recognize that, that's Sao Paulo. And it's, you see the beautiful, beautiful blue Atlantic Ocean there. Just spectacular to see from space. And this is Sao Paulo at nighttime. You're looking at all the city lights there. And if you look at those lights in the city there, I would ask you, do you know what's causing that? Do you know what those lights are from? And that's from all your students staying up late studying, right? I hope so. I hope so. And here you see a sunrise from space. Because we go around the Earth every hour and a half, we see 16 sunrises, 16 sunsets every 24-hour day. And I would try to see as many of these as I could every day because each one was a little bit different and they were all just spectacular. Well, at the end of the mission, and space shuttle missions were typically 2 weeks long, it would be time to come home. We'd fire 2 engines in the tail of the space shuttle, and it would slow our speed down just a few hundred kilometers an hour, but that would be enough that the shuttle would fall out of orbit and begin its return back to Earth. It only takes 8.5 minutes to get to space. Coming back down on the space shuttle took us longer, took us almost an hour because we didn't want to re-enter too quickly and burn up. So it was a nice gradual re-entry. We would end up landing at the Kennedy Space Center there in the state of Florida in the United States. We touch down like an airplane. We deploy that drag parachute out the back to help slow us down. And then we just put the brakes on and roll to a stop. And then we just sit in our seats and we wait for them to open the hatch. And when you first come back from space, you feel like you weigh about 1,000 kilograms. Because I had been floating around in zero gravity for 2 weeks. And then suddenly I came back to this pull of gravity and I felt so heavy. My arms were heavy, my legs were heavy. I was a little dizzy when I got back. And it took a day or so for that dizziness to go away, and maybe a week or so for your muscle strength to come back. And then you're pretty much back to normal. So here's a picture of me 2 hours or so after we landed on my first flight. So I'm there on the left-hand side. And after we took this picture, I turned around. I looked up at the word Columbia there, and I was staring at the space shuttle, thinking, what an amazing vehicle this is. What incredible technology. This was my house in space for 2 weeks. This thing protected me from the fiery reentry coming back into the atmosphere. And then the next thought that popped into my head was, I got to do this again. And I don't know if any of our students go to the theme parks and they go on a roller coaster and they get off and they run around and get back in line and do it again immediately. But that is exactly how I felt when I landed on the space shuttle. I wanted to go up immediately and I knew I had to go up, a few more times. And I ended up traveling 4 times into space aboard the space shuttles. So that is a little bit about living and working in space. I say thank you very much. I will stop sharing and we can take some questions here if anybody's got a question.
Pessoal, então, uma fala muito inspiradora, né? Poder conhecer um pouquinho mais a jornada do John no espaço. E agora a gente vai abrir, pessoal, para 3 perguntas. Então, vocês podem levantar a mãozinha aí no chat, né? Já vi que o Miguel tem uma pergunta. Miguel, você pode abrir o seu microfone. Até não sei se a gente vai conseguir abrir o microfone, mas eu vou pedir então para vocês escreverem no chat 3 perguntas que a gente vai direcionar para o Dom poder responder para nós. Perguntas, curiosidades, coisas que vocês, né, têm vontade de saber e conhecer sobre a jornada do Dom no espaço. Eu vi que o pessoal estava... Ariel, perfeito. Eu vou pedir para vocês, por gentileza, só escreverem no chat, porque a gente não vai conseguir abrir o microfone. Então, vocês podem escrever a pergunta que a gente vai passar a pergunta para o Dom. Então, vamos lá, Miguel é uma primeira das perguntas, a Jéssica é a segunda e o Álvaro o terceiro, pode ser? So, Don, what was the most challenge that you have to be an astronaut?
That's a very good question. The hardest part of being an astronaut is learning all that material and getting it in your head so you don't forget it. You know, if I take a math test and I miss one question, maybe I get 95 out of 100 and I did pretty well. But in space, if I forget something, it could cause a problem, it could cause an accident, it could ruin the mission, it could ruin my life, right? So it's very important for the astronauts to study really hard every day. So we're constantly studying. To be an astronaut, I trained for 4 years for my first flight. We spend a lot of time in the classrooms, just like our students do. We spend time underwater practicing spacewalks, and we spend a lot of time in the simulators practicing the mission, going through procedures, learning where all the switches are and how everything operates there. But I think just the biggest challenge is, you know, you got to work hard and you got to learn all that material. That's why it takes 4 years to fly on your first mission. You also have to be pretty patient because takes time to become an astronaut.
Thank you very much. Another question. How does your family react when you tell them that you are going to be an astronaut?
You know, my mom was just thrilled. I mean, when I told her that I had been accepted, but when I was a young boy and said I wanted to be an astronaut, my mom never discouraged me. My parents got divorced, so I grew up just with my mom. And I give her a lot of credit because when I said, Mom, I want to be an astronaut, she didn't say, oh, you can't do that. You're not smart enough, tall enough, whatever. She never once told me that I couldn't do it. So I just thought, well, I'm going to do my best and see how far I can go, how close I can get to the astronaut program. And the day that I got selected to be an astronaut, my mom happened to be visiting me in Houston, Texas. And I got off the phone and I told her, I said, Mom, I made it. And it was an incredible event to be able to share with my mom, who was really supportive, you know, when I was growing up.
Perfect, thank you. Last question, just a minute. So Emerson is asking, during your mission, which scientific experiment carried out in this space surprised you the most in its results? Something you didn't expect to be so different from Earth.
You know, something that is very, very different from Earth is looking at how fires burn. When we have a candle here on Earth, the flame comes up to a point because on Earth, with gravity, hot air rises and it draws that flame up to a point. In space, without gravity, hot air doesn't rise. So instead of a flame coming up to a point, in space it burns perfectly round. So if you had a candle in space and you lit the wick, you'd have a round fireball on the end of the wick, just because you don't have gravity up there. So to watch something as simple as a candle flame and to see how different it is in space, that was so fascinating for me.
I'm going to ask the question, review the question again, Tamara, because the question was, how have you experienced seeing the Earth from the outside of the atmosphere fundamentally change your understanding and concept of the borders of the country, of of all of us belonging?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. That's excellent. We have that phrase that there are no borders in space, when there actually are a few. There's a few borders between some of the national parks, and different cities will have borders from them with the lights. You can see more lights in certain areas. North and South Korea, there's a very distinct border because North Korea doesn't have much electricity, where Southern Korea has a lot of electricity, a lot of lighting at nighttime. So there are borders that you can see from space, but overall, you're looking at the Earth as one planet. And the biggest change that happens to every astronaut, Marco Pontes and the other 650 astronauts that have flown in space, if you ask them that question that you just asked me, they're going to tell you, I'm changed because I saw how fragile our planet is. You see that thin layer of atmosphere, and that affects everybody. It makes you want to come back to Earth and protect our planet. The second change that happens to every individual, it changes your view of your place on planet Earth. I grew up in the city of Cleveland. It's in the state of Ohio in the northern United States. So I used to tell people I'm from Cleveland. Today, if you ask me, hey, Don, where are you from? I'm going to say I'm from Earth. And for me, it no longer matters what city, state, country, continent, language, religion. None of that matters. We're all Earthlings. We all have to coexist and get along on this planet, and all of us have a responsibility to take better care of it. So I think everybody that goes to space feels like they belong to Earth and not just any one city or state or country. I'm an Earthling.
So the last question that I really enjoy here is, what is the furthest point a human have ever explored in outer space?
The furthest that any human has ever been from Earth is just about maybe a couple hundred miles from the moon's surface. So maybe 350,000 kilometers from Earth. That's it. We're going back to the moon in March of next year. We're going to send some astronauts around the moon. They're going to go roughly that same distance. But maybe 20 years from now, we hope to send astronauts to the planet Mars. And the astronauts going to Mars, it's not this generation of astronauts. The astronauts going to Mars is represented by our young students that are with us here tonight. 20 years from now, you are the perfect age to be those astronauts heading to Mars. And it's my dream that when we go to Mars for the first time, that it's not just one country like the United States or Russia or China or India, but I hope that that crew leaving Earth, going to Mars on that first mission is truly international and represents, all of us here on planet Earth. So why not have a Brazilian be the first person to land on Mars, to set foot on Mars? It's possible, but it takes a lot of hard work in school. So if you have a dream of maybe going to Mars one day, you can start right now. Tomorrow morning at school, you just always do your best and never give up on that dream.
That's great. The last question, because I'm trying to get a kid who's not very happy in this group, saying that he waited all night to answer. Okay, he just did it. Okay, forget about him. He's just not very cooperative. So, Don, there's one more question here that I really like that I think you're going to enjoy. What is your favorite country seen it from space up above?
My favorite country, I love looking at all the countries, because I love traveling and to see places from above that I've never seen in person, only in books, but to see it with my own eyes was amazing. Naturally, I like the United States because I could recognize the features there. We would pass over Houston, Texas, where I lived, and I had a pair of binoculars. I was trying to find my house. Now, that's a really stupid thing to do when you're up in space. Why do you want to see your house that you can see every day? But I'm looking for my family. I wanted to connect with my friends and families back on Earth. But one of my favorite areas of the planet was Egypt. And the reason it's one of my favorites, There's very low humidity there, so the air is always crystal clear. You have the beautiful brown desert. You have the blue water of the Mediterranean. And then cutting across the middle of Egypt is the green Nile River. And you have the irrigation where they're growing crops along the river. And it's just such a contrast between the bright green, the beautiful blue Mediterranean, and the brown desert that it's just spectacular. I visited Egypt when I was in university. This was about 45 years ago or so. And so it's kind of special for me to see Egypt. I could see the pyramids with a pair of binoculars. I had climbed one of the pyramids when I was there, and here I am in space, 300 kilometers up, and I can see that pyramid that I climbed. So when you have connections to these places, you know, it's just such a great thing. I saw Brazil many, many orbits, and I saw your beautiful rainforest and your beautiful beaches there. And I can't tell you how many times, as I mentioned earlier, that I said, boy, I wish I was laying on that beach right now, just totally relaxing. So maybe one day I get to do that.
Perfect. So, you and I work a lot with kids. So there's a lot of kids fighting here to kind of ask you a question. And there's this kid that he's not very happy. He's dying to ask you a question, but he's not giving me the question. His name is Juan. He's in the group and he keeps saying that I want to ask a question, but I'm asking him, Juan, I'm going to ask you again. Juan, eu vou perguntar a você de novo. Qual é a sua pergunta para o Don Thomas? Escreve para mim fazer a pergunta para ele e traduzir. Eu já te perguntei 3 vezes. Essa é a última chamada. Depois tem uma menina que chama, tem uma pessoa que chama Thalias. Thalias, qual é a sua pergunta para o Don Thomas? As últimas 2 perguntas, porque ele tem que ir, tá bom? But whenever we have kids, you know how it is. We work with kids. They get very excited and then they don't get to go. All right, we're going to wait just a little bit. So meanwhile,
sometimes they get a little nervous talking to an astronaut.
Nervous. So meanwhile, there's one question here that I'm going to pick. So Thalias e Juan, vocês têm 2 minutinhos para escrever a pergunta que vocês querem. Aí a gente vai deixar o Don ir. Então, por favor, escreve agora no chat quais são suas perguntas. So, how did you feel when you left Earth to space? What was your feeling? How was that sensation sitting on the shuttle, leaving Earth to space?
On my first mission, when I felt that push in my back, indicating that we had just taken off, I'm on my way to space. I'm strapped in, I had my helmet on, visor down. Nobody in the world could hear me, and I'm screaming inside my helmet. I'm going, Yahoo! Go, go, go! Because this is the dream of my life taking place right in front of my eyes. And it was such an exciting moment. You know, I dreamed of that for 33 years. And then to know that I'm on my way to space, I was so excited. A little piece of me is scared because we've had 2 bad accidents with the space shuttles. So I know there's a possibility I might not get home. So a little piece of me is scared, but my main emotion, again, is just excitement. Like, I want to go. Let's go explore space.
Excellent. Okay, I think this is it. That we answer Juan. That was his question. How was your feeling living in space? And how was your feeling in gravity? How did you feel living in gravity for the time you spent in space?
In zero gravity feels like jumping in a swimming pool or jumping in the ocean when you're just floating and you don't have weight on you. It feels very, very similar to that. When I first came back to Earth, I told you I felt like I weighed 1,000 kilograms. And my wife and I went to our city swimming pool that evening, and I jumped in the water. And all of a sudden, I had the weight off of my body, and I felt like I was floating in space once again. So being in water, a swimming pool, floating like you do, that is a very good simulation for zero gravity. And that's how we train our astronauts to do spacewalks. We put them in a swimming pool and where they can kind of float in the water.
Excellent. Tamara, is all yours. Back to you.
Ok, thank you. So thank you very much, Dom. Muito obrigada, Dom, por compartilhar a tua jornada tão inspiradora. E agora a gente vai continuar, pessoal. Nós temos mais uns minutinhos até finalizar, mas nós vamos continuar nossa jornada refletindo um pouco mais sobre as experiências, como que elas podem transformar a nossa vida e a vida dos jovens. E para isso eu passo a palavra de volta agora para o Frank da Costa, que vai fazer uma fala breve sobre a importância do STEAM nessa fase escolar. Então, tá contigo aí, Frank.
Olá, tudo bom, pessoal? Meu nome é Frank da Costa, sou gerente aqui da NASA Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, trabalho ao lado do Don Thomas. A gente viaja muito junto, fazemos muito evento junto e a gente estamos muito felizes de estar aqui com esse equipe para poder transmitir todas essas perguntas e respostas para vocês. Eu estou aqui mais para falar um pouquinho sobre o programa STEM. O programa STEM é o programa que o Dom realmente utilizou para ele poder ser o astronauta. Então, para vocês ver, para você poder ser um astronauta no futuro, vocês que são crianças que estão aqui, até pais que estão aqui, para ajudar a motivar os seus filhos, é super importante eles ter e fazer todo o programa, que é o programa STEM. O que significa o programa STEM aqui nos Estados Unidos e também no Brasil? É simplesmente a ciência, a tecnologia, a engenharia, a arte e a matemática. Esses são os pontos muito importantes para os seus filhos trabalhar nessas academias, né, que é a ciência, a matemática, a arte, a engenharia e a tecnologia. Tudo isso é que você faz para criar e para ser um astronauta, um engenheiro na NASA e tudo demais. Para trabalhar na NASA, não importa que país que você está ou que você mora, se você tem essa credibilidade e estuda o STEM, você vai ter a oportunidade de portas abrir para você, para ser um astronauta como o Don Thomas, ou para ser um engenheiro, ou para ser uma pessoa que vai trabalhar em tudo que é tecnologia com a NASA, e também a parte de ciências e matemáticas. A arte vem mais na parte de desenhos e na parte de engenharia que ajuda, que desenha o plano para foguetes e para tudo demais. Então, isso é uma coisa muito importante. E a arte estimula a mente para você ser bom em matemática, ciência, engenharia e tecnologia. Isso foram tudo os objetivos e as fórmulas que o Don Thomas teve que aplicar quando ele era criança para ele ser um astronauta. Isso quer dizer, você tem a oportunidade de ser o próximo astronauta, ou o próximo engenheiro, ou trabalhar na NASA aqui nos Estados Unidos. Agora, o meu trabalho aqui é inspirar e trazer as crianças, junto com Don Thomas, para vir para os Estados Unidos para poder conhecer o complexo do Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, ou Houston, em Texas, que são nossas duas matrizes, que as crianças podem vir e trabalhar, estudar, ser criativo e colocar e sujar a mão em tudo que a gente tem aqui nesses dois complexos. Agora eu vou deixar com a Tamara para ela falar para vocês um pouquinho qual é o projeto que vocês têm aí com Urânia. E eu e o Don Thomas vamos sair da câmera um pouquinho. Thank you, Don. Thank you for everything you did. You're amazing, as always. And there's a lot of kids here. There's like, it was 50 people and half of them are kids. So really excited to see all these Brazilians so exciting about astronomy, space, ingenuity and technology. That's awesome. Any last word?
I just want to say thank all of you, all the students and the parents for joining us here this evening. You know, I hope that we have a chance to meet in person one day. Maybe you come and visit at the Kennedy Space Center. I'm there all the time. I was just there yesterday talking to a group. So I enjoy sharing my experiences. If you come to the Kennedy Space Center, you're going to see amazing things. You'll see the launch pads where I launched. You'll see a real Space Shuttle Atlantis, that flew 33 missions. So there's so many things you'll see. You'll have a great time. But the key message I want to leave with you tonight is to work hard. Always do your best in school, and never, 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 never give up on your dream in life. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for having me with you here this evening.
All right.
Bye,
Tamara, it's all
Dom.
yours.
Thank you. Ok, thank you. Pessoal, a história do Dom, ela nos mostra que o nosso futuro ele pode ser alcançado, né, através da educação, da ciência e da coragem de sonhar. Eu até anotei aqui, né? Ele falou: work hard and be patient. Então, trabalhe, né, duro e seja paciente. E pensando nisso, a Urânia, em parceria com a Hey Peppers e com a Expedify, quer convidar vocês para poder viver uma experiência única, transformadora, profunda e exclusiva aqui no Space Kennedy, né? Então, eu quero trazer para vocês, pessoal, de uma forma muito rápida, em primeira mão, um programa que a Urânia está desenvolvendo. Então, já prestem atenção. Abril do próximo ano, o objetivo é poder trazer vocês para viver essa experiência aqui junto conosco, certo? Vou abrir aqui a tela para vocês, né? Conectem, porque tem um projeto muito legal nascendo. Qual é o objetivo principal? É poder abrir essa oportunidade para jovens, alunos de 14 a 17 anos, que hoje já têm um bom nível de inglês, que conseguem se comunicar, principalmente para aqueles que conseguiram escutar bem, né? Entender bem a fala do Don Thomas e vir aqui para os Estados Unidos para estudar ciência, tecnologia, engenharia, artes e matemática, num lugar onde a gente vai colocar vocês muito próximo de algo único, realmente pontual. Então, o nosso programa ele vai ter 3 dias dentro do Kennedy Space Center, onde vocês vão estar conectados com pessoas como o Dan, com pessoas como o Frank, e vão estar desenvolvendo seus projetos, vão poder estar trabalhando com projetos diferentes do que a gente vê hoje no Brasil e conectando vocês com o futuro, porque bem como o Dom falou, ele já tinha tido a oportunidade de estudar STEAM, o que fez com que ele teve essas oportunidades também. Então, de uma forma breve, vocês vão ter um momento dentro do Space Kennedy, vocês vão ter um momento também para trabalhar a parte da engenharia dentro da Universal Studios. A gente vai trabalhar um pouco de artes dentro da Disney e também vamos trabalhar um pouco de física no iFly. Então, esse é um programa exclusivo, é um programa onde vai ter apenas 25 vagas, e é um programa que a Urânia está trazendo em primeira mão para o Brasil e para os alunos que são parceiros da Urânia, certo? Então, vocês vão receber a certificação da Urânia junto com a Hey Peppers, vocês vão ter um reconhecimento às escolas parceiras como uma escola inovadora, que de fato está levando seus alunos para um novo nível e trazendo esse olhar diferente. Então, agora, pessoal, eu vou pedir para vocês colocarem o telefone de vocês na tela, tá? E conectem aqui nesse QR Code. O QR Code vai direcionar vocês para o WhatsApp do Pedro. E o Pedro vai estar fazendo um atendimento individual e personalizado com cada um de vocês, trazendo e tirando as suas dúvidas, ajudando desde os primeiros passos, né? Entendendo se você já tem passaporte, tem visto americano, para quem esse programa, lembrando que é para jovens de 14 a 17 anos, que já tem um nível de fluência, né? Que já estão prontos e que já conseguem ter essa conexão e possam alcançar o próximo nível. Então, coloquem aí no QR Code, já deem um oizinho para o Pedro, que ele vai dando o atendimento para vocês conforme for chegando as mensagens. Mais uma vez, ele é um programa único e exclusivo para apenas 25 jovens, então ele realmente é um programa que vai ser muito especial, certo? Então, mais uma vez, em nome
Agora,
da Urânia. Oi?
só rapidinho interromper. A tela, você não tá com a tela do QR Code. Se puder trocar para colocar o pessoal ali e poder escanear. De
Desculpa
qualquer
aí,
forma,
pessoal.
pessoal, a gente tem o
Eu vou
grupo ali,
colocar
né?
o.
Eu acho que estão todos no grupo, né? Se não estiverem, eu vou mandar aqui no chat também o link do grupo. E aí vocês podem entrar no grupo, tirar as dúvidas por ali. A gente pode mandar ali o QR Code também para vocês escanearem e entrar em contato direto com o Pedro. Não tem problema nenhum, tá, gente? E
Perfeito, vou
estamos
colocar agora.
100% à disposição, né? Para qualquer necessidade, qualquer dúvida, seja referente ao planetário, seja referente ao Space Campus, né? Que é esse programa novo super bacana aí que a gente está lançando agora.
Excelente, obrigada, Rafa. Pessoal, já coloquei o QR Code lá no nosso grupo, todo mundo tem acesso, já podem conectar, já podem encontrar. O Pedro já estava ajudando também e dando auxílio para vocês. Então é só chamar ele que, pela ordem, ele vai dando atendimento e tirando todas as dúvidas. Certo, pessoal? Então, mais uma vez, em nome da Urânia, quero agradecer a participação de todos, agradecer em especial ao time da Urânia, que estava aí dando todo o suporte, agradecer o Frank, né, pela conexão. Thank you very much, Dom, foi um prazer, e a gente verdadeiramente espera que em breve a gente possa estar juntos, né, vivendo uma experiência juntos aqui no Space Kennedy, trazendo os filhos de vocês, os alunos de vocês, para uma experiência única que vai prepará-los para um futuro brilhante e extraordinário. Certo, pessoal? Uma boa noite a todos. Mais uma vez, obrigada. E qualquer dúvida, a gente segue à disposição lá no nosso grupo. Bye!